You were in my.
Welcome to the Fairy Whispering podcast. With me tonight, I'm really delighted to welcome storyteller Owen Staton, who hails from Wales, which is such a beautiful country. And I went to university there, so I have a special interest in this part of the world. And Owen's going to share about his background with storytelling and especially about Welsh folklore and some fairies too. So welcome, Owen.
Thank you very much. It's so nice to be here. Thank you for speaking to me.
Thank you. And I absolutely love your podcast, Time Between Times. Your story, your delivery is just so beautiful and so moving as well. It really feels like, as a listener, you're taken into that space and time that you're talking about. And you also do a podcast with Bethan Briggs Miller, don't you, called Spectre of the Sea.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. There's a couple of irons in the fire, really. I've always been a storyteller, almost as far as I can remember, going back to my late teens, I suppose. But and here we are, 30 years later almost, or even more. And I'm still telling the stories. But I've got a new platform, and Time Between Times has been a bit of a dream come true, really, in that I've been able to tell stories every week, and just to see the amount of people who are involved in them, and to see that grow, and to see people. And you say about the delivery, but I'm a great believer in storytelling as almost a form of therapy, about how you can lose yourself in a story and just lose and just forget about all the troubles and the cares that are going on in your life, and just lose yourself in a tide of tales. So that to me is really important. So I'm glad you're enjoying them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's really valuable. That's something that I practice as well. That's part of my way of connecting with nature and enchantment is through mindfulness. Yeah.
Oh,
So
I
yeah.
myself, I've always had an interest, and I talk a lot and speak a lot about mental health, and stress management, essentially. And for me, storytelling is invaluable. I've just, in the last couple of days, I've started a new sort of venture on Time Between Times on YouTube, of a thing called Slumber Stories. And it's basically where I've been to some of the greatest old bookshops in Wales and bought some fantastic old books, some of them over 100 years old. And a lot of them are like children's stories. We're going back to the early 20th century.
Oh
And
wow.
what I do is I
Oh,
just tell the story in a sort of a relaxing tone, just to help you go to sleep. And I've done two so far, and they've been really well received. So that's maybe something you want to have a look at as well. It's something different from Time Between Times. It's on YouTube, and it's called Slumber Stories. And yeah,
fantastic.
it's the first time I've ever been glad that my audience is falling asleep, But it's good.
That's great. I'll put all those links in the
Yeah.
description for this episode so people can find that really easily. Yeah. Yeah. So how did your interest in storytelling begin, Owen?
It's a bit of a weird one, Claire, in that I am a bit of a failed actor. And the reason why I'm a failed actor is that for many, many years, I spent working as a police officer. And as a police officer, I was working a shift pattern. So I was very, very difficult for me to be in, let's say you said, let's meet every Thursday night and we'll put together a play. I couldn't do that sort of thing because I was working different shifts all over the place. And I worked in mid Wales, so I had a lot of traveling in my job. So essentially, I was a massive creative. I desperately wanted to do things. So I had to find a way almost of doing things by myself, which is I'll leave that there. But it was all about how I could just perform and get that, scratch that itch, if you like. And I started telling stories, and how it started was kind of weird in that I got a gig in Swansea Museum. You might remember Swansea Museum. It looks like an old Greek sort of pillared
Yeah.
building just as you enter Swansea.
Hmm.
And they employed me to act as a Roman soldier for children coming in to learn about Roman Britain. So I had the uniform, got good legs, right? So I was there, and I would sort of talk about life in Roman Britain, and the kids would come in and they seemed to enjoy it. And I prepared a half an hour talk, and that was fine. And we talk about how they built the houses, where they lived, what life in the Roman army was like, where they went all over the world. And I can remember I turned up one day, and the first school came in, and the teacher said, "You've got them for an hour. That's okay, isn't it?" And I just remember thinking, "Oh gosh, I've got them for an hour. Okay." So I told the story of Theseus and the Minotaur, and just as like a myth, an old Greek myth that a Roman soldier might know and talk about. And it came from there. And it started to the point where I enjoyed doing the story more than I did the sort of living history. And I would sometimes play a Celtic guy as well, living locally, and I'd tell lots of Celtic stories. And that's where it grew from. And it just became bigger and bigger. And I was based as a police officer in a small town called Ystrad, which is hard to say, I know, but it's a beautiful place in the Swansea Valley. Swansea Valley is a place so dark. They say the sun only shines for an hour a day, all right? And but it is a magical place. It is full of fairy lore. It is full of ghosts. It's full of folklore. And when I went there, I joined a group called the Sleeping Giant Foundation, which I was involved with work. But there's a mountain in the Swansea Valley called the Cribbarth, and I would suggest anyone listening Google the Sleeping Giant in the Swansea. If it was anywhere else in the world, it would be a national monument, okay? But it being in the middle of Wales, nobody publicizes it. It's just there. And you drive up the valley, and there in front of you is a mountain that looks like a man sleeping on his back. And it's an incredible mountain. And on top of it, there's a crashed Canadian bomber from the Second World War. There are so many ghost stories based around the bottom of the Cribbarth in the farms nearby, and the place is absolutely rife with fairy stories. So for me, what became for me, I used to spend a lot of time putting together what were called basically police workshops, where surgeries. We would turn up at like small community halls, post offices, things like that, and I would sit and I would let the local people come to me and speak to about their concerns and things like that. And naturally, in the middle of nowhere, some of these were quite quiet. So I'd sort of sit there. So I'd always take a book with me, right? And I'd always take a book. And I can't remember exactly which one it was, but on this occasion, I took a ghost story book and I was looking at it. And this old lady came in and she sat down in front of me. And before she even began speaking to me, she looked over and she pointed to the book and she said, "Oh, you like ghosts, do you?" I said, "Yeah." And she told me this fairy story that chilled every bone in my body.
Chills.
And
You just, I don't even know the
exactly,
story.
right? And it was just a
Yes.
phenomenal sort of moment, a seminal moment for me that showed how alive folklore was. And then she went on to tell me a ghost story, which I'd already knew. And it was chronicled back in the 18th century by a guy called Edmund Jones, who was a minister who traveled Wales, picking up ghost stories, fairy stories, that sort of thing. And he wrote a book called Apparitions and Spirits in Wales. And this story was in there. But this lady told it to me as if it had happened yesterday.
Mm.
And that showed to me how alive these communities were with this stuff, that things were going on in the community, or people were telling these stories that were hundreds of years old, but they were still incredibly relevant. And that to me brought them alive and
Mm.
made me think about how important all this was.
Mm.
I was really lucky in the early part of the century. I know early part of the century. It sounds like years ago, but sort of
Yes.
2006, 2007,
Yeah.
just on the back of what I've been talking about, really. And Also, around that time, I was involved in a horrible incident in work that really affected me, and it affected me for a long, long time. Still affects me. But on the back of that, I went back to being more creative. I went back to, I sort of lost myself in my career somewhat. And I came back to, and I made me realize how important the storytelling, the performing, the writing, the looking for these things was. And
Yes.
I started to develop as a storyteller, and I took a show to Edinburgh to the Fringe, and it took a lot. It took a lot of credit card space, and it took a lot of cats. But I went there and I performed, and I went back the next year, and then a couple of years after that, I went back again, and all of a sudden, and my my skills, I suppose, started to grow a little bit. I was lucky. I went to America to tell some stories, and I went all over the UK, and things have been really, really good. We talked briefly just before you started recording, but
Yes.
back in the when the just before the pandemic came, I spent the last 8 years of my police career in the training school. I trained new recruits and that sort of thing. And I can remember thinking, oh God, I've gone stale. I was telling about the same 5 stories, whenever I performed. And they were stories I'd known for a long time. And they were really nice stories. But I was like a singer who had no new songs, or a comedian who told the same jokes. And then the pandemic came. And I found one of the challenges I set myself was, I thought, right, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sit in the chair, which is just behind me here, and I had an iPad on a tripod, and I thought, right, every week I'm going to record myself telling a story, and I'm going to put it out on YouTube because it will test my skills, it will
Yes.
expand my repertoire, and it will just make sure that I stay creatively alive. And I did that, and Time Between Times was born from that. It was really slow. I can remember the first week I had like 6 views, and like 3 subscribers, 2 of them being my kids. And then, we went on, and I kept at it and I kept at it. And the year later, I thought, hang on, I think perhaps a podcast is a better format. So I transferred it. Well, I didn't transfer it. I started it again as a podcast. And now I've still got the Time Between Times video channel, which I put the slumber stories on and things like that. And every week, and I try to do it without fail. I mean, last week I did 5 episodes just as a charity thing. I tried to raise money, and I did a story every day for 5 days. But I released 5 episodes. I think I'm on about 150 episodes now. And although I struggle with this, I feel the format. I start the format in that I always start it the same way, in taking the person, the listener, to the time between times, to the fire pit at the heart of the forest, when the time is neither night nor day, etc., when the veil between our world and the fairy world is at its thinnest. And then I tell the story, and then I finish it. I thought, gosh, is this boring? But I think most of the listeners like the repetition. They like the fact that it's always the same. And although it's never the same, I always change it a little bit. It's the same format, and I'm so pleased. I've met so many lovely people, like yourself, many, many other podcasters, many people who are interested in the paranormal, or people who are interested in the strange, etc., and who are genuinely nice people. And it's been such a massive influence on my life. I think I'm quite a positive person, I've always been around quite a lot of negativity, and just to be involved in this with you mentioned some of the people, Beth and Delith Bader. I do a lot of stuff with Dr. Delith Bader, who writes about ghosts. Joe Hickey Hall from the Modern Fairy Sightings podcast. A lot of the uncanny community. We do so much. Amy Boucher from Stratford. I'm not from Shropshire even. Like I could go on and on. Just people who are in doing it for the right reasons, like we are here, and are genuinely interested in folklore, and that is me essentially, and that is where I'm at.
Yeah, it's fantastic just listening to you saying about this community. Um, it's it's such a supportive community. I've found that everyone that I've been in touch with or spoken to has been very open-hearted, generous, and that's part of why I love doing this as well. It's meeting people like yourself, having a different insight on life and different approaches and different reasons for being involved in this world. Sometimes it's people come to it through an experience. Sometimes it's just through an interest in the material, various reasons. But it's fascinating, isn't it, in this world that we can all be so connected in this way.
It's incredible, Claire, when you think of it.
Yeah.
And 5 years ago, would you have even thought that you would be able to share your experiences, your love of fairies with like-minded people from all around the world? And I always,
Mm.
it always surprises me and it always moves me. And I'll say it to you the other day. I mean, I'd had a bit of a bad day in work. I'm very lucky that I live on the cusp of a forest, and I take my dog up there every evening. And on this occasion, I was in there and I was lost in all the troubles, the tribulations that were going on. And I put on your podcast. And I sat there on a bench in the middle of the woods and listened to you talking about fairy experiences from years ago. And just for that 30 minutes, whatever it was, I was able to go to that place that I love, listening to the experiences of somebody who'd had similar experiences or who was interested in the same thing.
Mm.
And that is an incredible gift that you can give, I think, as a podcaster. And a
Mm.
lot of us podcasting, I always say this on Time Between Times, it can be a very lonely experience. I'm telling a story on a Thursday night, and it feels
Yeah.
like I'm just shouting into the void, and I'm thinking, is anyone actually listening? And then on occasion,
Yeah.
people are listening and people are enjoying,
Mm.
and it's such a fulfilling experience, and it's such an amazing
Yeah.
thought to think that maybe these stories that have been in books for hundreds of years, that haven't been,
Mm.
people haven't heard for centuries, and now
Mm.
a new audience who are enjoying them.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And thank you for keeping them alive. I mean, there's like you, I love books. I've got hundreds of books and world of books, there's a wonderful old bookshop in Newton Abbot where I live, and he sells secondhand books, West Country books, if
Oh,
anybody Newton Abbot's.
yeah.
He's got local books, and but he gets in a lot of original editions of books like William Crossing's Tales of the Dartmoor Pixies, which is one of my absolute favourite books about pixies. So yeah, support your local bookshops, everyone. um, but yeah, it's such a treasure, isn't it? And thank you for listening and for that feedback. Because like you, I do this because it's a passion. It's not. I don't make anything from this. It's I just do it because I want to put the information out there. Share some. I suppose it's a bit like sharing a bit of hope, isn't it? As well, in this world where there's so much trouble at the moment, just to be able to put a little bit of light out there into the world.
I think that's bang on, and also it's sharing a dream, and it's sharing a vision, and it's sharing the sort of stuff that isn't often shared. In that it's very difficult for some people to hear old stories. You may have had an interest in fairies for 50 years, but
Mm.
perhaps have been a bit too shy to mention it or to even think or know that there's a community out there who are really interested in that sort of thing. And these podcasts give you, and people like yourself, give people a gateway into that world and somewhere that is where they can go for just a few hours every here and there, just to go there and sit down and listen to maybe similar people telling similar experiences of things that have happened to them.
Yes,
It's really powerful. It's
it
really
is.
powerful. Yeah.
It is powerful. Yeah, and that's very validating as well to hear that from you, for me, and for other people listening as well who might be thinking, "Oh, should I've had this experience," or I'd love to tell this story. Yeah.
It's incredible. And I mean, going back to myself, and it feels so liberating. And I know a lot of people talk about this being on the cusp of a new age or something like that. And I'm not going to
Mm,
go down that rabbit hole because it is a big rabbit hole. But
mm,
I just feel that we're in that place where we can share. When I was no more than a baby, right? I can remember it must have been before my sister was born because it was in the bedroom that uh, uh, my sister moved into when she was born. I lived in a bungalow in the Avon Valley up near Port Talbot, which is just outside of Swansea. And my parents lived in this bungalow, and my room was at the far end of the corridor. And one night, and I can clearly remember this, and like I say, I must have been under 4 years old. The door to the bedroom was just a bit open, and you could see the shadows of the corridor outside, and I could just vaguely hear the television playing. And a light came into the room. And I've talked about this on other podcasts, but this light floated into the room, and it was about the size of a football. It was like the sun, okay? And it came into the room, it lit up the room and shined through it. It cast shadows all over the floor, and it absolutely terrified me. And it went behind a cupboard that was against the wall opposite my bed in like a little gap, and it disappeared there. And you could see the shadows pulling it in. And it's one of my earliest childhood experiences, and one which I must believe must have something to do with the Tylwyth Teg. And I kept that within myself for probably about 48 years, 47 years. But now I have a place to talk about these places, experiences,
mm.
without ridicule, without judgment, without people laughing at it. It's something that we've all got. I mean, maybe the audience are laughing at it. I don't know. But it's something that happened to me. And I've got somewhere
Yeah,
to share that. And I think
yeah.
all of us, that's a big thing. That's a big thing.
Thank you for sharing that, Owen. Um, and I think the people that listen to this or your podcast or whatever they listen to and they're interested in this subject, then those are the people that will receive it. And there might be somebody that will hear these stories and be like, oh, that's interesting, but they're not quite ready to accept them at the moment. But then they might, a couple of years down the line, we're all in this kind of our own process with all this, aren't we?
Oh,
Um,
definitely. Absolutely we are. And but we've got a place to be in our own process. And
yeah,
that is such a good thing. I mean, someone like yourself, who've obviously, you've had fairy experiences, you've had
yeah,
things, but it's given you an outlet for that, doesn't it? And I bet you've met
yes.
so many people that you wouldn't have thought would be able to share their experiences or would have experiences, and it
Mm,
validates yourself as well. It validates yourself that you're not alone, and that is great.
yeah, yeah. Going back to your experience you just shared,
Mhm.
whereabouts were you living at that time?
I was living in a small village called Cwmavan. Now, I'm from Cwmavan.
Mm,
Cwmavan is a small, tiny little old mining village about 2 miles north of Port Talbot. It's only about 2 miles south, so it's in between Port Talbot and a place called Pontrhydyfen, which is famous worldwide. It was the birthplace of Richard Burton, the birthplace of Ivor Emmanuel, the birthplace of Rebecca Evans. She's a famous opera singer. Ivor Emmanuel was a famous actor. Richard Burton, obviously, everyone knows. An incredibly creative place, a place full of magic, full of joy, full of wonder. It has two viaducts in it, and I went to school in Pontrhydyfen. And it's where I first got my first sort of interest in ghost stories. In that I would sit in the yard, and there was a graveyard opposite the school, and there was a friend I had in school, and we would sit and we would talk about ghost stories, and it was just amazing. It was amazing,
yeah.
and I grew up in there, and I was really fortunate to grow up in a small village in the Welsh Valleys, where there
Mm,
was this sort of element of belief in old things and old ghost stories and things. However, my parents are very grounded people, incredibly, working class Welsh background. My father was a steel worker. My mother worked in the NHS. But neither of them would ever say that they'd seen a ghost. Neither of them would ever say they believed in any of these stories. And though they didn't mock me or dismiss, I don't think I ever discussed that with them. But they've always sort of wondered where myself, where I came from really as a sort of quite artistic sort of guy. They still don't understand me, I know that, but it's and they lived in this little bungalow that was nestled into the mountains, and the mountain called the Vole, which is in Carmarthen, a huge mountain that once had a coal stack on top of it, which was taken down in the Second World War because the Germans were using it as a marker to find Swansea from the area. But it was such, if anyone ever goes to the Avon Valley, and Port Talbot has got quite a bad reputation. It's a steel town. It's a very old town. A sort of dirty sort of place with its town, with the steelworks on the cusp of it. But it is a wonderful place. It is a magical place. Anthony Hopkins from Port Talbot, Rob Brydon from Port Talbot. There's a real strong sort of Michael Sheen from Port Talbot, real strong cultural edge there. And yeah, that's where I grew up. I grew up in that town and in that area and in that place.
Oh, I wonder if, because I've heard, obviously there's the stories of the knockers in Cornwall and in Devon. There's stories of mining pixies and knockers too. And you're saying it's a mining area with the mountains, and yeah, I wonder if that light was something to do with them.
It could well have been, couldn't it? It could well have been. I very much sit on the fence. I'm a storyteller. I'm a believer in positive vibes, if you like. I'm a believer in belief. If you can put it that way. I think having a belief, having an interest in something is extremely important. In my life, I've seen 6 ghosts. Okay, and I count that sun, the light, as one of those 6 ghosts. However, I don't know if I believe in them. It's a strange thing. I sit, but those sightings, those gifts, if you like, that have come to me in the ghosts that I've seen, maybe the fairies I've seen, have given me such a sense of wonder in the world that I value them so much. When the things have happened, I've never been scared. I've had a little, shiver up the spine, but I've always thought, well, that was incredible. But I've not tried to overthink it too much. And I don't know, it could have been that I was tired, it could have been for whatever reason. But those are gifts to me, and they're
Do you
gifts.
share one of those ghost sightings with us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I'll go back to my police times.
great. Yeah.
It was 2005, and I was in the Swansea Valley, and the Swansea Valley is a gorgeous place. And I was driving from the bottom end of the Swansea Valley up to the top. And the top, there's a place called Danarogov Caves, which is a cave site. It's open to the public. The cave in the Swansea Valley is one of the best places in the country for it. And Danarogov is a show cave centre. So I was driving up towards that. It was about 3 a.m. And I had a colleague with me in the passenger seat. And don't tell anyone, but he was sleeping. And we were driving up just about 3 a.m. and we came over a brow in a small village called Wen, which is up there. And on the right-hand side, and I tweeted about this just a few days ago with photographs. On the right-hand side, it was an old bus stop, which was made of stone. And I came over the top of the brow and I looked directly at the bus stop. And in the bus stop, there was an old lady. And the old lady was sort of bent over, really stereotypical sort of, image of a lady maybe in her 90s, with a sort of shawl, no hat on. And she looked at me and I looked at her. I'm driving a police car straight up the middle of the village. I looked at her and then she picked up her hand and she started waving up and down with her hand. And I looked at her and just drove straight past. Okay. And I drove straight past and I thought, what was that? So I turned around the corner and I pulled the car over and I woke my friend and I said, look, you won't believe what I've just seen in the bus stop in Wen. It was an old lady. But it's 3 a.m. And he turned to me and he said, well, hang on. What if there was an old lady in the bus stop, trying to flag down a police car in the middle of the night? I think perhaps we better go back. So we turned back and we were back there within 2 minutes and there is nothing around this area and there was nobody there. Absolutely nobody. but I could see her as clear as I could see any person. She was as corporal. She was, fully formed. She was a person in everything other than the fact that she wasn't there seconds later. And I spoke to a few people in the locality, over different things. And there's been many sightings of an old lady on that road, which was strange. And but there we are.
Has
And
it
when we were there,
been?
when we were there, a car passed us. We sort of
Yeah.
we were there for a little while, and a car passed us, and we looked at the car, and it was full of teenagers. So my friend said, "Look, let's stop looking for the ghost. Let's pull that car over," because it was like the middle of the night in the middle of nowhere. So we did that, and I said to them, I said, "Why are you here then, guys?" And they went, "Oh, we're looking for ghosts." Couldn't believe it, you know. So I told him my story, and my friend was like, "I can't believe you told them about the ghost." Yeah, it was great.
That's brilliant. I wonder if anybody stopped for her.
I wonder as well. I
Yeah,
do.
what would happen? Oh my gosh.
I know. I know. It's yeah. It's a
Mm.
strange sort of almost stereotypical ghost sort of sighting, and there's no. I wish there was more to it. I wish there was more of a story, but like a lot of ghost stories, there are, which are just I turned around and there was something there, and yeah, it's really strange experiences. I live in a new house. You wouldn't believe it to look at it, but well, when I say it's new, we've lived here for about 20 years, but we were the first people to move in here. And in this room I'm in now, I can remember one day the bathroom is next door, and I was the only one in the house. I gone to the toilet, and it was the middle of the day, and I walked out, and the stairs are right in front of you as you come out of the bathroom. And in the corner of my eye, I saw something, and I turned around, and a small girl walked out of what is my main bedroom into this room where I sit now. And I didn't feel any fear. I didn't feel anything at all. She was definitely there. I looked at her, she looked at me. And like all these things, I think when you
Mm.
go looking for ghosts, you seldom find ghosts, but they
Yes.
come looking for you. And
Yeah.
I've not seen her since. I don't know anybody else who's seen her. Yeah, just those things. I've had many experiences like that, but
Sort
yeah,
of era was she from, Owen?
fairly modern. She was fairly
Right.
modern. But I'm lucky. I live in. I've discussed this with a friend of mine who's involved in this community. But where I live used to be a zoo, unbelievably, and
Oh,
it's. I would have been there when you lived in Swansea. It was a place called Penscunner Wildlife Park, and it was
oh,
closed in the late 90s. It had a very, very distinctive car sticker, which all the cars used to have of this like 1970s style animals. Which, if you Google it, Penscunner Wildlife Park, you will see it, and no
yes.
doubt a lot of your listeners will have because every car that went there had this sticker.
Where was that then? I don't remember that.
It's in the Neath Valley. In the Neath Valley,
Beneath
yeah.
Valley. Ah,
And
yeah.
I'm lucky I live where that used to be. And sometimes I maybe think maybe that was something to do with it, but
Yeah.
because where I live, the flamingos used to live, and many people would have come and gone this way. So yeah, and a
Yeah.
lot of joy, wouldn't it? And a lot of
Yeah.
feeling, a lot of yeah. So there we go.
Amazing. I remember from Swansea, my favourite park, which I used to walk through every day to get up to my college at Town Hill, was Cwmdonkin. So if I'm pronouncing that right, Cwmdonkin
Wow,
Park.
yeah, you are. Yeah,
Yeah,
beautiful place, absolutely beautiful place.
beautiful. Yeah, really, really magical. It's like a little magical oasis in the middle of the city.
Dylan Dylan Thomas called Swansea a lovely, ugly town, and I think that is I like to quote Dylan Thomas, but I think that's a really good description of what Swansea is. It's an old town. It had a hard time during the war, but oh my gosh, is it beautiful in some
Mm.
places? Around the Gower, you go to Mumbles, you go to the Cumdonkins, the Singleton Parks, those sort of areas. It is a
Singleton. Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely stunning place. The beach there is just
Mhm.
beautiful. And I think as a youngster, I couldn't wait to leave this area. But as I've got a bit older and a bit more grounded, and I sit back and I think I'm really lucky to live where I live. So yeah.
I think that's a common experience because I was the same, Owen, with wanting to leave Devon. And it's only since I've been away, university, I've worked in London, etc., and come back here that I really feel, this is my roots and
Oh, yeah.
how beautiful it is. Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in Oakhampton when I was younger, and
Oh, did you?
a lot of storytelling in Oakhampton, actually. And yeah, it's with a lovely storyteller from that area. He's from Exeter, actually, a guy called Dave Oliver. He's a puppeteer and storyteller, and I learned so much from him in the 90s. And recently, my eldest son has just finished. He was in Exeter for 3 years in university. So I spent quite a lot of time over the last couple of years driving up and down the M5, and past the Camel and all the things at the side. I love Devon. I think Devon's a fantastic place, a magical place, really, really magic.
It is fantastic. Now, I'd love to hear, you're going to share a story with us about the Welsh fairies.
Yeah,
Is that okay? To do
yeah,
that?
absolutely.
Well,
It's okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Before we go there, I think
Mm,
you might have, so many, perhaps all of your listeners have never listened to Time Between Times. So
mm,
as a storyteller, I'm a believer and in a magical time of day. And I know it could be any time when you're listening to this, but as I look out the back window here, I can see the time between times is almost here. And the time between times is the time when it's neither night nor day, but the sun has gone and the sky is grey. It's the time when the veil between our world and the fairy world grows wafer thin. So thin that for a few moments, and just a few moments, we can reach into their realm. And for a few moments, they can reach into ours. You see, now is the time that people see lights in the sky. Now is the time that people see the ghosts of the past, the ghosts of the future, the ghosts of the present. And now is the time that people see the Tylwyth Teg, the Very Folk, the Fairy Folk, the Tuatha De Danann. Now is the time that people see fairies. So leave your modern trappings behind and join me at the fire pit at the heart of the forest for the time between times. Here in the valley above the town of Neath, there is a place of magic. Many, many years ago, down in the abbey, with its stone towers that stretched to the sky, the monks toiled their way through the days. But here, about 2 miles away in an old cottage, riven with rain, lived a small boy called Eladir. Every day he would go down into the town and look for work, for his mother was ill and lived alone in the house, but there was none to be found. Every day he would return with whatever he could have stolen from the stalls or begged from the street corners, until one day the fair came to town. There were singers and acrobats and dancing bears, but the most thing that he wanted was the stage would be set up in the middle of town, and all the tradesmen would seek an apprentice. "Go, Ella dear," said his mother, "and please come back with some job, some money, some food, and something for us to live with." "I will," he said, and off he went. He came into the town, which was bustling, full of people. Dawn was just breaking. It was the time between times. And there he walked and clambered up onto the wooden stage and stood with all the other prospective apprentices. Throughout the day, they were chosen one by one. The carpenter came, the blacksmith came. And the line grew shorter and the day grew longer. Still Eladir stood there, waiting and watching, until the sun started to set and the moon started to rise. And then out of the crowd he could see a monk making his way towards the stage. I need an apprentice for the abbey." "Yes, that one will do, the tall one with the red hair. We'll take him." Eladir was taken to Neath Abbey. "My name is Brother Rufus, and what we do, Eladir, is every day you must make us a porridge in the morning, just as the sun breaks. As the day grows long, you must make us food for our dinner and another meal for our supper. In between, you must clean the dining hall. You must clean the walls outside, and you must feed and water the horses. Do you understand? Yes, I do. Eladir went back to Neath Abbey, and that became his life, and he hated it. Every day the sun would rise, every day the sun would set, every day the monks would go about their business, and every day Eladir hated it with every fibre in his body. He wanted nothing more than to go home. So he waited one day, just as the sun started to set, just as the gate to the great abbey was about to be closed. And he ran. He ran through the abbey gates and ran up into the Neath Valley. He ran and ran and ran until he could run no more and felt like his heart would burst from his chest. And then he heard them behind him, the great hunting dogs of the abbey, and Brother Rufus's voice calling, "Catch him! This way he went!" He rushed into the forest, clambered over hill, clambered under tree until he came to a small cave, and there, with no breath left in his body, he sat and he waited and he cowered as he felt the dogs getting closer and closer and closer, till he was only seconds away from being discovered when he felt a tap on his shoulder. He spun around, and there in front of him were two of the Tylwyth Teg. They were small men, no more than the height of his knee, each of them covered in leaves and small hats. Shh! They both went, and one of them turned to the stone at the back of the cave and started to turn his hand round and round and round, and where the stone was appeared a tunnel of leaves leading into the mountain. "Come with me," said the fairy, and stepped inside. The other fairy, "Shh, come with us," and stepped inside. The hunting dog poked his head around the corner of the cave, and Eladir turned around and dived into the tunnel and fell into the depths of the earth. He landed with a thud in a land beyond compare. The sky was perpetually grey. The leaves were all the colours of the rainbow. The waters were so clear as crystal. And there in the middle of this land was the castle of the fairy king. "Welcome, Eladir, to this, the kingdom of the Tylwyth Teg. You can live in a house down by a river. There you will eat with a golden fork and a golden knife off a golden plate. There you will play football with a golden ball on the banks of a golden bridge. And you will live the life that you've always wished for here in the kingdom of Arawn. But know this, you may only leave once a year. Once a year and once a year only, and you must never, ever take anything from here. Never take anything at all, do you understand?" "Yes, I understand." Every night Eladir ate off a golden plate, played football with a golden ball, and lived the life of the happiest man who had ever walked the lands. Until he started to miss his mother. And he went home. He went back to the cave, turned his hand upon the cave, and appeared in the hills above his village. Walked down to the house where the roof had almost collapsed, and there he found his mother in bed, as pale and as white as a sheet. "I am so glad that you have a life. Now you must forget about me." He returned to the land of Faerie, but all the Hwyl in his heart had gone. How could he live like he did as a king under the mountain, when his mother was as poor as the mouse in the church? He took a fork from his plate, a golden fork, placed it in his coat, waited for the time between times, and waited for the fairies to be playing football with a golden ball. Made his way back to the cave, turned his hand on the wall, and ran back to the Vale of Neath. Back to his mother's house, the golden fork clutched in his hand. He burst through the door which hung off its hinges. But his mother was not there. The king of the Tylwyth Teg was there. Illadir, you have stolen from us. You have disobeyed our rules. You are no longer welcome there ever again. All magic will be gone from your life, for you have been a fool. And the fairy king took the fork and walked out the door. And Illadir sat on the bed and watched him walk up the hill to the cave, where he vanished under the mountain. Illadir never went back. But back to the abbey he did go, where he grew old and became a monk, and eventually became the abbot of Neath Abbey. A man called Gerald of Wales was travelling all around the area collecting tales, and he wrote down this story, the story of Illadir and the fairies. But even now, here in Castell Nedd in Neath, in the land of Nedd, the valley of Gwyn ap Nudd, it is said that the time between times, the time it's neither night nor day, but the sun has gone and the sky is grey. If you look carefully on the mountain tops, you may see the fairies playing football with a golden ball under the grey sky. And you always know that there is magic only a hand's width away. And that, my friends, is the tale of Illadir and the fairies. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much.
Wow.
Did you
Thank
enjoy
you
it?
so much. That was so beautiful. Amazing stuff.
That's,
Thank
I'm
you.
very lucky in that the Neath Abbey is only a few miles from my house, and I walk a path up in the woods not far from where I live, and there are these small caves where over years hundreds of people have moved their hands upon them, and I just wonder if one of them was that cave.
Oh, gosh, thank you so much. Deep bow to your wonderful skills as a storyteller, Owen.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that
Yeah.
the listeners enjoyed it. And as we said before, I have a podcast. It's called Time Between Times, and I
Mm.
tell an old story like that every week. And I hope that somebody might want to check it out, and hopefully they'll enjoy the stories.
Yes, and you've been raising money. I think you mentioned earlier you've been raising money for a charity, haven't you?
Yeah,
So
I have.
about that.
I've recently done the Police Rehabilitation Centre in Goring-on-Thames is really important to me. I'm no longer in that line of work, but it's somewhere that has meant a lot to me over the years. So I did have been raising money for them. I do a lot of charity storytelling and things. I think it's important that we do that we give whenever we can. So yeah, if anyone would like to have a look at that, the link would be on the Time Between Times. And my website is welshstoryteller.com. So if anyone wants to visit that, or on Twitter, I'm the Owen Staton. Presumptuous, I know, but it's the only one I could get. So that was the Owen Staton. And there we are. So there must be another Owen Staton. Well, there is another Owen Staton. So I know, but I'm the Owen Staton.
There's
So
only one of you, though, Owen.
yeah, I'd like to think.
Unique.
But there we are. So yeah, I'd love
Yeah.
if anyone would like to get in touch that way, that'd be great.
Lovely, and also Spectre of the Sea as well. But I'll put all those links in the notes for the show.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a
Yeah.
lovely little drama that I've done with my friend Bethan.
Mm.
It's an exploration of the folklore of the coast of Wales, done through like a little drama with a lot of storytelling in it as well. So,
Mm.
and I've got a couple of other ventures coming up, and obviously the slumber stories as well. On if you go to the Time Between Times on YouTube, you'll find the stories where I just read old books essentially, but in a way designed to try and help you go to sleep.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much for your time, Owen, your time between times. And we are in the time between times, aren't we? Because it's
Yeah.
as we're recording this, it's sort of coming into twilight, moving into the twilight hours. So thank you ever so much. And yeah,
No, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to be here, and I enjoy the podcast. I really enjoy it. And yeah, let's keep sharing those stories, because that's what keeps these things alive, is when we tell them and when people hear them, and when new people are brought to old stories. I think a bit of magic happens.